Hi everyone, this is the first week video. As I said, I will be making videos like this every week for the next 5 weeks to basically introduce the week's materials and remind you of a few things. So if you're watching this video, you should have already watched the main video on the home page and get yourself all ready for our 5 weeks together. And as I said in the other video, the quarter will be broken up into three main parts, which the first part leading up to an exam on August 3rd, if I remember correctly, August 6th, excuse me, by 11:59 p.m. You'll turn that in. The exam will be based on the material that we cover this week and the material that we cover next week, and it will be the material having to do with personhood, as well as the beginning of the study of philosophy and ethics itself. So to remind you, well, first of all, make sure you buy the books, and you need the Crosby book right away. And we will be reading, your first Crosby reading is on Thursday of this week. Let me double check. Yeah, on the 29th, which is Friday, excuse me, your first Crosby reading is due with the notes, and that reading material can be dense, so make sure you prepare for that. But the way the week will proceed is that you will obviously watch this video, read the week overview, read the first through the first module having to do with the overview of the quarter. I always forget the name of that module. The exact name of the module is, where is it? I always forget this. Overview and course materials. Make sure you go through that. I will possibly ask some questions on the quiz on which is due to Tuesday night by midnight, or 11:59 on Tuesday night. I might ask some quiz questions based on the material from the first from that overview. So make sure you go through that. You watch lecture 1, you do the readings on Russell and convince me that I'm wrong, and Kant, and then begin Crosby. And to remind you, the way the week is set out is you have those 3 quizzes, Tuesday night, and then Thursday night, and then Saturday night. Typical of summer. There's never a let up for 5 weeks. You're basically taking like 2 classes in 5 weeks or 10 weeks. But instead it's 1 class in 5 weeks, but it's about the same amount of work as 2 classes. So I've said this several times. I've taught this class and I've taught summer many times over the years, and students fail or they have to drop because they do not take summer seriously. Summer is actually harder than the rest of the year. Okay. I remember when I was a student undergrad, I was shocked at how hard summer was. It was so much harder. So prepare yourself for that. And again, as I've said elsewhere, I take the ethics core requirement very seriously. So this week we have the 3 quizzes, and we begin the materials that will end up that will lead you towards that first exam on August 6th. And the first 2 weeks, which are really 4 weeks of material in a normal quarter, are introductory, at least insofar as they will get you thinking, first of all, what is philosophy, what is its value, and then why does ethics have to be understood as a branch of philosophy? Because as I've said, and I say in the lecture as well, that ethics is a branch of philosophy. It must be understood that way because ethics requires reasons. Ethics requires a because. Ethics requires that you articulate more than just an opinion, more than just a feeling, more than just an emotion, more than just an intuition. You must give reasons for the choices that you make and the values that you are upholding. And an ethics that, I mean, it's really an ethics in name only, but an ethics, I almost put it in quotes, an ethics that doesn't give reasons is just an ethics that is unprincipled. It's mood driven. It's you wake up one day, you choose this, you wake up the next day, you choose that. But at the core of the human person and the human attributes is rationality. Across cultures, one of the things that's distinct and held to be distinct among humans is our rationality. Well, that means we have the ability to reflect on the options available to us and to choose wisely based upon our principles or based upon an understanding of the various options available, etc., etc. And if humans are free, then they will be able to choose the various, make the various choices that make sense according to their understanding of proper way to live, excellence, etc. Well, again, that requires philosophy. That requires reasoning, logic, uh, weighing of alternatives, listening to arguments. It does not, it would not be called ethics, and it could not have all of that rationality and that choice and that uh, recognition of the depth of human possibilities. It would not have any of that if it didn't have philosophy. It would just be like throwing a dart at a board. It would be like, you know, those things where you put out two bowls of food, and if you've ever seen this, and like for the Super Bowl, and one team is in one bowl of food and the other team is in the other bowl of food, and then you just let the dog go, and whatever bowl the dog eats from is the team that's supposed to win. Clearly arbitrary, clearly not based upon the players, the excellence of the players, how they match up, etc. Just purely arbitrary. Would we call that a choice? It seems to me that's not a choice. Well, opinion is like that. I like chocolate. I like beer. I like wine. I like sunny days. I like rainy days. Those are all just kind of similar to that dog, just eating the food that it gravitates towards immediately. That is not the basis of the choices we make in our lives that are meaningful, based on values, based upon excellence, based upon a life well lived, based upon development of human potential, based upon relationships and friendships. This is what ethics requires, and this is why it leans on philosophy. It needs that rational heft. It needs that rational background, foundation, all that logic and reasoning and all of that has to offer in order for the decisions that we make in terms of our relationships and in terms of our values actually are decisions, as opposed to just throwing a dart at the dartboard and whatever it lands on is the thing you do. So if that's true, then that means ethics must be studied and understood as a branch of philosophy. Well, and philosophy is about offering reasons and not leaning on necessarily emotions and logic. Logic is a branch of philosophy, just like ethics is a branch of philosophy. But it's hard to understand what philosophy is in a age that we live in where most people don't study philosophy. It used to be, if you went to a Jesuit university in the 50s, for example, every student, it didn't matter what your major was, you minored in philosophy. If you studied psychology, you had a minor in philosophy when you graduated. If you studied engineering, you had a minor in philosophy when you graduated. Because philosophy was held to be so essential to actually faith and religion, as well as being able to be a good citizen and take your place among the people in the country who are well educated, and couldn't be held to be philosophy, or excuse me, couldn't be held to be educated if you didn't have philosophy. And again, philosophy has its roots going all the way back to the ancient Greeks. It's a Greek word. Um, as as you might know, the PH in PhD stands for philosophy. So if you walk into your math professor's uh, office, and on her wall it says is her doctorate, on her wall it'll say that she has a master's in philosophy, master's of philosophy, or excuse me, she is a doctor of philosophy in mathematics. And if you do the same thing with your chemistry professor, he will be a doctor of philosophy in chemistry. Why? because these various disciplines, as Russell says, come from philosophy. Philosophy is the art of wonder. Philosophy is the similar to the hypothesis that you see in scientific method. The hypothesis is not science. The science is proving the hypothesis. The hypothesis is the wonder. Okay, so philosophy has at its core reasons. It has at its core skepticism, as you'll see in the Convince Me That I'm Wrong reading, of being open to what possible answers there could be. It begins in wonder, as Aristotle says. It is opening the mind as well as structuring the mind. It's a combination of both of those things. You structure the mind with logic, reasons, being able to articulate your choices, but you also open the mind to possibilities. You allow yourself to be, as Russell says, a citizen of the universe. So what we see with Russell, which is the first piece, he's going to talk about the value of philosophy, and the value is in the fact that it leads to, or it provides only uncertain or non-definite, or I don't want to say indefinite, but non-definite answers. Because when you don't know what the answer is, you're open to what the answer could be. If you know that 2 + 2 = 4, you don't wonder. If you know that a giraffe is a mammal, you don't wonder. But if you're trying to figure out what a duck-billed platypus is, you're open to wondering. What could it be? If you're trying to figure out what that light is over there, you're open to what it could be. But once you know what the answer is, you stop wondering. So there's something magical in philosophy in that it explores ideas that will never give us definite answers, like why do people die? What is the best way to be a friend? What is time? What is a life well lived? How are we best just? What is the best form of government? What is the best way to do historical research? Or what is even history? These definitional questions. So it's all throughout our disciplines. And it is at the heart of the academic enterprise. The academy was the name of Plato's school in ancient Athens. So we get the word academic from that. And so all of our various disciplines across the university have their link to philosophy, because at the core of the philosophical enterprise is that inquiry, that search, that openness to possibilities that will affect not only the way we are in terms of science, but will also affect the openness and the freedom and the charity that we offer in terms of ethics. If you think about it, as you'll see Russell talk about, closed-minded people are very fearful. Prejudiced people, racist people are very fearful and they can't listen to you. But the person who is open, the philosopher, can have an opinion and an argument that he or she backs up that opinion, but can still be open that there might be other answers. It's freeing. So Russell talks about this, that the person who thinks they have all the answers it's very their life is feverish. Also, other people think that the only way to talk about things is quantitatively, and you'll see that in my lecture about the practical man, the one who can't really even articulate why to have children, because having children doesn't make sense in terms of a quantitative analysis, say financially. How do you justify the trip to Bali that I talk about in lecture 1? How do you justify spending money on vacations or beauty? When the person who's practical will say, well, what did you get out of that? Philosophy opens you up to all of that. So philosophy helps you answer the practical person who always wants the bottom line, but philosophy also provides you with the freedom to not be tied down to whatever your culture says is true, to whatever your time says is true, to whatever your religion says is true. Those are all ways of being dogmatic, which is mentioned in both Russell and in the next piece. So then when we move beyond Russell, to the Convince Me That I'm Wrong, it's basically the introduction of ethics as a branch of philosophy, and that ethics requires reasons. You can't just have an opinion on pornography or abortion or other things, or you can have an opinion, but that's not philosophy. But the problem is that it's much easier to just say, I think abortion's wrong, and then walk away. It's much more difficult to say, I think abortion's wrong, and then give reasons, because the minute you give reasons, the other person can engage you. When you don't give reasons, the person can't engage you. The only thing they can say is they can attack you personally, but they can't attack any reasons because you haven't given any. So at the core then of ethics as a branch of philosophy is that notion of giving reasons for the choices you make, for the values that you uphold, for the notions of excellence that you have. And that also should make you very comfortable with both being impartial, and there's lots of discussions in that reading about being impartial, trying to adopt a view of objectivity and weighing things in a dispassionate way, just like Russell talks about in the first piece. But in addition, it talks about skepticism, and skepticism is just a mode of inquiry. It's not taking somebody automatically, but saying, if you're going to make a claim, prove it. So philosophy and ethics that is philosophical is an ethics that is discerning, that looks for reasons, that deliberates, and deliberate comes from the Latin meaning to weigh. Juries deliberate, they weigh the evidence. So your decision making should always be deliberate, because you should have weighed things, because you're capable of that. The giraffe is not, the elephant is not. So, and then the final piece of the week is moving beyond Russell on the value of philosophy and the introduction to ethics that we see in Convince Me That I'm Wrong. We now move into Crosby, which is dense, but it's a beautiful book in the sense of it gets to the question of what is a person, and that will, for him, automatically include morality. Because when we understand that something's a person, it seems to invoke in us an understanding of a respect. So Kant talks about this, and that the Kant reading is tied in at the end of the week as well. The respect for persons. Can you understand that she is a person, and that fact that you understand she's a person not affect how you view her morally? In fact, notice that in some of the worst cases of prejudice and killing and the racism that you can see in Rwanda in 1994, or Hitler's Germany, or the United States with slavery, there always needed to be first kind of a depersonalizing of the Jewish person, of the black person, of the person of another tribe. Because once you depersonalize them, then you can act in a way that is okay morally, but would not be okay morally if they were a person. So you say they're just a cockroach, they're just an inferior, they're just this. And then I can, because they're not a person, I can treat them this way. Another way of looking at this idea of how personhood invokes morality, well, is with animals. Notice that in the chain, whatever you feel about the treatment of animals, but as you move from, say, a snail all the way up to a whale or an ape, as you get closer to humanity and the notion of personhood, notice it becomes much more difficult to just say, do whatever you want with the animal. You might say that with a slug, but even notice that you have two fish side by side, and one of them happens to be a shark, and the other one is actually not a fish. Technically, it's a mammal, and that's a dolphin, but they're the same size. Why does it seem so much more difficult to kill the dolphin as opposed to the shark? They're the same size, they both swim in the water, they both, all of these other things. Is what makes the dolphin special that it's warm-blooded? I don't think so. What makes the dolphin different is that it has a very high intelligence and can communicate with humans in a way that makes it, like dogs, like cats, kind of a person. And therefore, we might say, well, okay, then I don't feel comfortable treating a dolphin the same way as I do a shark. If that made sense to you, then the notion of personhood will make sense in terms of what it invokes in us. But it's very interesting because there's also the difficulty of defining personhood. What is a person? And the two kind of will go together, as you'll see from the beginning. Trying to figure out the moral responsibility of when you hold that another person is a person or another thing is a person, but then the moral responsibility also reveals that they're a person. So it's kind of chicken or the egg kind of thing. And that might be the best we can do, because these things are not lending themselves to answers like in chemistry or physics. That ethics is not like that. Philosophy is not like that. As Russell says, philosophy gives us non-definite answers. So there's no definite answer we can show of what is a person. But if a person invokes strong moral claims upon us, then we can't avoid what personhood is and what personhood requires. And we also know deep down that a life with meaningful relationships with persons is actually a life well lived. And the Greeks probably had that right. So we have to, again, get into that question of personhood. And then this will be this first element of, or first part of the quarter, dealing with, again, beginning with philosophy, then just ethics on a cursory level, then getting into Kant of respect for persons, then a deep question of what is person and how does that affect our view of how we treat them, as well as treat ourselves, because we also are persons. That will set us up for the exam on the 6th, and then we can move into other questions later on with character and questions of things like self-control. But whether we're talking about personhood or character or self-control, we're all throughout the quarter talking about rationality and the ability to reflect on our choices and our values. Okay? So that's about our setup for week 1, and I hope you have a good week. And remember, I have office hours on Mondays, excuse me, and Thursdays from 12 to 12:30, and I'm always available by email.